routine meditation and shopping. Partisan thought is like making brand comparisons in the attempt to get the very best buy on stuff you don't actually need. But we should also say, in fairness to all of you who still haunt the public markets, on stuff you do need. Upon hearing this and suddenly realizing his own consumer habits, one man damn near gagged. Stimulation, a commentary regarding one aspect of mortal existence as per an imaginary Socratic dialogue. Food excites the body, but what excites the mind? How about fear? Okay, let's try it again. Sex excites the body, but what excites the mind? Curiosity? Hold it. One more time. Movement excites the body, but what excites the mind? How about learning? Hey, you just don't get it, do you? And after a long pause, the other voice whispered behind its hand, what am I supposed to say now? Arguing with and thinking the thoughts of others is like a no-armed man beating a dead horse that never existed. Well, hey, Horace, what could be more fun than that? Meat prices update. A truism sequenced is worth its weight in collective stability and individual chitlins. Life in the mental ballroom. Talk is music, discussion, the dance. Those with no partners may dance with themselves. One guy's advice: never tell anyone your real secret dreams for several good reasons. One is it may spoil them. Another is that they may come true. A third is that people may laugh at them. And another is that something else might happen. In the world of the mind, until proven, everything's a theory. And after it's proven, it's dead. From our Let's Be Blunt files. The difficulty in selling the idea of nonpartisan thinking is that there is no reason for doing it. A supremely scientific, closed system view of health. A nervous man, for instance, is a happy man if he is alive and satisfied to be nervous. Some pleasant exiting view news from the doctor. No ill, no prescription, no charge. A certain man called together his clan and proposed that they adopt as their family motto the following: WAEJYWAS. We're all expendable, just you wait and see. After the coffee and bundt cake, there was some whispered discussion of trying to have him committed. Seriousness causes dizziness. Thus is explained the popularity of carousels. Yes, both the physical kind and the mental. A legend concerning philosophy, religion, and all matters metaphysical. You can talk all you want to, but things that are as they are. Some engineering news. The ordinary are so dumb. How dumb are they? The ordinary are so dumb that they don't even realize they speak and think in cliches. Police action and the mental state. Sometimes, even when they weren't after anyone, the local authorities would send out a helicopter to buzz the woods just outside of town. Police action and the mental state. Told you it wouldn't help. Judge Gerber's glutinous law of intellectual justice. If you can be upset, you will be upset. Getting old narrows the arteries everywhere. The news. Everyone's mind is on a mailing list. An upper floor housekeeping tip. When seen in the light, partisan thinking and stupidity looked just like a dead rat. A dad advised a lad, don't let your private, exotic thoughts turn too much into public mystical speech. Corollary, few want to know what a mystic really knows, or else they'd be one themselves. Corollary adjunct, one man was a mystic, until someone asked him if he was. In every hobby will be a faction of real nutty fanatics. Just look at life. A man approached a conveyor of non-conventional thinking and told him, I've heard you speak before and really enjoyed it, but my wife says you're crazy. And the speaker gave the surroundings a quick up and down look and replied, I'm on your wife's side. There are originally two types of myths, fat ones and lean ones. And once ordinary minds get hold of them, they turn them all into lean ones. Upon hearing this, one guy asked another guy, do you get it? Another guy replied, no, I don't think so. From our math department, this definition, 0. What's left if you subtract the talk from civilization? Okay, for all of you Homely Shopping Network fans, an update to an earlier consumer-oriented story. Additional difficulties in establishing this kind of product as a desirable item in the public marketplace is the inability to present it vis-a-vis brand comparisons, the lack of special sale prices, and the impertinence of personal testimonies. Of course, another way of looking at it is that this just leaves more of it for the rest of us. How the mind works. If you always take off your right shoe first, you'll always know which is your right foot. Cows always look for their sense of excitement from other cows. The reason that theology never evolves into the study of logic is for the same reason that only the simple-minded believe that there is any way out of any closed system. This is also why the discipline of logic never becomes super logic, and the religious continue to dance in circles. A kid hollered, "Help! I've swallowed a worm." And his father replied, "Calm down, it's just growing up." "Yuck!" cried the kid. "Yuck!" So long as you take what the mind thinks seriously, liberation will escape you. And now, another legend regarding philosophy, theology, political theories, and economic models. It's all a power struggle. That's all, just a power struggle put into words. One man, one Monday, mused. Nonpartisan thinking is like being on your own personally constructed, rocket-powered merry-go-round with a shaky spindle, razor-saddled horses, neural juice music, and no one with you save the astonished spectators just out of reach. And lo, he was pleased with his muse. The mystical sense of urgency is all personal and individual and is always fueled by the one involved. How sequence works in a three-dimensional context. A man stood in the middle of the neural city and exclaimed, "If everybody's days are numbered, who got 47? After hearing this, one guy asked another guy, "Do you get it?" Another guy replied, "Nah, I don't think so." Definition. Mature. Man's least favorite synonym for dead. The question and answer show. What's the best hobby in the whole world? telling other people what they should be doing. Then what's the second best? Not telling them. Wait! Well, why is one of them more popular than the other? You tell me. All of today's contestants were lodged in a Mayflower moving van. At least the lucky ones. One man says that compared to his best states of awareness, he has begun to think of his routine condition as a kind of mental PMS. Some cultural news. Definition: city art, refurbished cliches. Local conditions reminded everyone in the intellectual parade, those who do not oppose something go nowhere. And 27 independent marchers had to drop out. You can domesticate a wolf, but not housebreak a cow, for the same reason that ordinary thinking won't let you go anywhere alone. The time, 3 p.m. The day, Wednesday. The conditions, wet to moderately dry. The place, somewhere near here, when a reticent man thought to himself, if, as 'tis often said, talk is cheap, then why aren't all of us who listen rich? One man had a typewriter that would write stuff all by itself. And he was so impressed by it that he named it his mind. Okay. Ask again the one guy or the other guy, did you get that one? And alas, the other guy replied as before. No reasonable person would ever try to be a mystic without originally believing that mysticism exists somewhere outside themselves. Then by the time they realize it doesn't, for many of them, it's far too late. The ordinary notion of evolution brought up to fresh speed. Creatures do not adapt to their environment. It's that life continually adjusts and rearranges itself. Adage update. Everyone who talks a good game. That is, they talk themselves, which is their game. The collective passed particular laws for the simple reason that without them, individuals would not behave in the manner prescribed. Same with collective, conventional truth. The process of physical survival is one of choosing. So too with the mind. But a mystic goes beyond the binary menu. Yet another way to go about it. A poem. Don't quote me. Don't quote you. Don't believe anything your mind wants you to. Upon being orally privy to this, one guy asked himself, did I get that? Then quickly laughed and scoffed at the foolishness of his question. Oh, the spookiest story ever told about a man sent out to find himself. The ultimate in self-help programs. Never insult a stranger. Civilization. The simple's attempt at mysticism. On the form under occupation, the unconventional thinker and talker wrote jazz performer, and under instrument he put tongue. In spite of how it might seem at first glance, it is the weak who are satisfied with partisan thinking. For it actually takes an unusually strong person to not take mental sides. Men explain their lives through personal anecdotes for the simple reason that that's what most men's lives consist of. Personal safety tip from the New Intelligence Fraud Squad. Every real thinker has his own number. One man's inner dialogue with his routine mental operations. Bunko is as Bunko does. Hey, how's it going, Bunky? And now, a definition for our guest. Mystical thought. any that's unnatural for you. And now for all of our regulars, you're not liberated until you know that you are. Then it's too late. And now for our attentive students, this metaphysical clarification. Karma is not our deeds, but our genetics. And not to forget our more advanced aficionados of the esoteric, this note. More final steps to nirvana have been made through Haagen-Dazs than through fasting. One man named his steed Mindset McElroy and his mind Horseshit Del Santo. Noting that, as always on this planet, it all evens out in the long run. Everyone has a choice but a mystic. Everyone has an illusionary choice but a mystic. No one has a choice but a mystic, and everyone will find the last line illusionary. One day, one man looked around at his family and friends and announced, "All of you over 40, get out." Then did the same to his thoughts. From one view, the expansion of life is as unpredictable and chaotic as the workings of man's mind. You upperclassmen may also consider the vice versa version. One man's current theory. Everyone in life is pissed, but the really rich and successful and mystics. And well, mystics, how can you tell anyway? Were it not for fads, most people couldn't think. The trip. But a few can go who have no plans. What an extraordinary expedition. Another way to tell that you're a mystic in the bus station. No matter what destinations are publicly called, you never want to go to any of them. The mysticism that is publicly discussed is 90% suspicion, 7% imagination, and 3% smoke and aroma. Nonpartisan thinking, as practiced by the non-conventional traveler, is like dancing on one foot while holding them both up off the floor in reserve. An everyday reality update. The world is full of stupid, undeveloped, despicable people. It's just that a real mystic doesn't mention it. After all the contestants had been given their choice of words, one unconventional individual selected the spaces between them. From our maybe files, in spite of all that's been said, a mystic may be the only really serious person among us. One night, after a particularly exciting and surprising intellectual day, one man's higher consciousness winked at him and said, "Why don't you come up and see me sometime?" Fact, both literal and allegorical. No one, neither the ordinary nor the mystic, will ever be as free as they want to be. The transcendental journey described in a nutshell. It is only the mind that can be unborn after it is born. A fresh, comprehensive, and intellectual legend covering all pertinent aspects of the nature and dynamics of life from an expanded human view. Life is actually pretty simple. An allegory regarding meditation and self-reflection. One man told his son, "Don't write Buddha notes." Every morning when he would awake and start up the engine of consciousness to pull out of the driveway of sleep, one man would exhort his mind, "Okay, burn rubber." And oh yeah, there was also this other extraordinary man who pursued this extraordinary activity until he finally understood its full nature. Then for his own purposes changed its name from mysticism to, "What the hell is this?" In line with some of what we were talking about last time, if all of us, including you and I, were here last time, some of the ones that I pulled out, and if you recall, I was giving an either specious or spurious or alleged history of mysticism as it regards the ordinary workings of the human mind, and how the human mind will impose order if it is orderly itself, if it is a sane, middle class, suit and tie kind of mind. It will impose order on that which is disorderly. And on top of that, if it begins to dream of a sense of disorder, which is reflected in everything from the idea of let's all revert to nature, let's all go move in with Henri Rousseau, let's all paint with our left hand like children, let's all become uncivilized and get drunk and get in trouble this weekend, to very deep, real deep doo-doo mysticism, wherein the human mind will impose order after it sees disorder in mysticism. Then it will believe, if it goes far enough, that even in spite of that, inside the chaotic, non-ordered world of mysticism, transcendental, non-conventional, non-partisan thought has to be something of a rather stable, perhaps at a different level, but a stable core to it after all, as witnessed by the kinds of stories that there is this continuing secret knowledge that does not actually change, all the way from that to the more specific stories that every X number of years, every next number of generations, that some secret group of men get together and establish what sorts of forms, what sorts of activities will be reflected by this continuing secret knowledge, that there is actually some order, some stable direction to that which would apparently be verging always on this kind of merry-go-round with a very shaky spindle, that no one is quite sure if it's going to make it back around or not. Nobody's quite sure, is this making enough sense to even get my brain through this lecture, through this taping? Well, my mind, can it go one more sentence like this without absolutely coming apart? I don't know. If a government agency and bureaucrats put together the rocket of your mind, there is some question. Cows do come apart when they begin to approach the speed of light. Well, it is the same dynamics that if you have the collective, sometimes known as a mass, like a crowd, an unruly crowd, which is civilization, except they're ruly. But they're actually unruly. If you drive them fast enough, they splinter up, they come apart. It's one of the reasons there are laws and public, even uncodified moral attitudes that are absolutely decry mob action. People getting together because they, according to the movies and fiction, they will get into trouble. They'll go out and hang an innocent man. But that is not the actual physical reality behind why civilization, why life makes man collectively frown upon mob activity. Because mob activity can go too fast and come apart. I knew that would explain it to those of you who only laughed but was not sure what the intention was of mentioning cows approaching the speed of light. But all herd animals, cows and sheep, don't try it. But when they begin to approach the speed of light, it is worse than one of those Mickey Mouse rockets that NASA bought on the cheap from some outdated TV tube reconditioning place out in Omaha that's now building rockets. I shouldn't just leave it there, because all that simply leads back to collective intelligence, that if you got your ideas, if what you think, you either think it or object to it, which makes no difference. If you think it does, you are simple amongst the simple-minded. But if you think that which other people think, if the repertoire of your mind is only that which you picked up from others, at least we'd be laughing at the notion of sheep beginning to rattle and come apart as they move toward the speed of light. That is what happens to your mind when it tries to think on its own. He gets real shaky and people think, I got to stop this, I'm going nuts. What they're saying is, the mob is about to disintegrate. My sheep may come apart. They do not know it, of course, but what they're saying is, my God, I might suddenly get fired because I might have a thought of my own. And the news director, certainly, he's going to say, I warned you about that. For those of you who don't remember that one. The mind will impose, it has to, a sense of order, even in the midst of me using the mystical as being archetypical of the chaotic. Surely you remember I was using the comparison, if we looked at the mystical as often believed as being the core of such things as religion. Then religion, comparably speaking, is always stable. No matter what the religion is, it is stable, it is traditional, it is ritualistic, it is predictable. And those who dream of a mystical core to it, a mystical background, they do not, even should they not use these words, they do not dream of it, their mind does not picture it as being that predictable, that stable, etc. Because if it were, it would be on every street corner and it would have a name. It would be the first Antioch Church of Mysticism, or it would be, Bruno's Corner Tavern and Mystical Bar. The mind just accepts the fact, and it's not untoward, that if there is any sort of secret activity going on, part of its secrecy is that it is not systematized, it is not stable, it is not regular. But then if it even pursues that, what I'm saying, those that dream on a bit further, the armchair mystics, they will invariably come to the idea that, well, behind even that though, there's got to be a facade behind the flat. There's got to be, had this phony scenery, if that was religion, and they think, well, behind that is some real scenery, like mysticism. If they continue that, they'll then begin to think, wait a minute, behind the real scenery is more phony scenery, or do your own version. Dash. All right, semicolon. No matter what you do, some damn English major will rout you. Looking at it at that basis, what I was on the verge of mentioning last time, that I am now going to go over the verge. If you get really good, it is not simply looking at religion, not simply looking at anything else you want to pick out, literature, myths, architecture, fiction, and seeing them as being a kind of substitute, as a kind of simple, an every man's version of mysticism. How about that? Assuming right quick that you're following what I'm saying, that you could do that. We could just start naming things. We could start saying all of Shakespeare's works. The reason that they are so remembered, so revered, and still have such an impact, notwithstanding the arcane language, is that they are, whether intended or not, they are in fact a kind of available, dramatized exposition of the secret word, the secret knowledge, assuming that there is such. You know what we're talking about, the word that, the secret that Adam received when he ate the secret that Muhammad received when the angel said read, and he said, so I can't read, plus I don't see a book, and he said read up here. It was a direct, and of Buddha, that there was some direct knowledge that he finally plugged into, if you take the story as given, and he realized after pursuing all of the known, covered them all for us in advance, all of the known practices of fasting and etc. And then suddenly, after sitting alone and after trying all of the external practices, it hit him, in a sense, the kind of belief, I'm just using what's commonly taken as being mystical background or the history of it, then in some way he plugged into this unbroken chain, this continuing line of some sort of secret knowledge that just keeps going. Then we could look at such things. That's what I was referring to. We could pick out Shakespeare. We could pick out the Greek dramatist. We could pick out the samurai stories in other parts of the world. We could pick out the story of the church fathers of the Russian Orthodox Church. We could pick out just anywhere the kinds of stories from the African folk tales. You could pick up any book, just go in an anthropology section. It's not by the door with the weirdos. Move on over find the anthropology section and pick out any book on fairy tales, legends, myths, or look under the great books of the Western world, or if they've got a series of great books of the Eastern world. All of that, it is quite easy, and many people, not even with a particular interest in things metaphysical, I'm sure would probably give it some credence if we said that there is some sort of thread behind this, there is some sort of additional impact. Let's go back to Shakespeare, for instance, to say there's something going on there, that what he's putting in the mouths of people, not just the dialogue, but in the stories. You can look at Hamlet. You can look at Hamlet as being a version of something I mentioned last time that really drew a standing nonplusedness. And I was using the stories of the knights and how the continuity, the sequence of civilization, such as people worshiping the dead or respecting the dead. And I was pointing out it all fits because there's nothing wrong with missing your dead mother or cousin or brother. But to what avail? What's going on? Why is it that people treat it that way? And I know that's an extreme example to ordinary conventional minds, but I was hoping a little more than your faces reveal at times, that it is giving a sense of continuity. It's imposing, even though death seems to be disorderly, it's imposing a sense of order on top of this disorder by putting up headstones, by making big ceremonies out burying the dead. And I know it can be explained psychologically why it's a good catharsis for going there and weeping and getting drunk and beating up your uncle who's also Irish. What's the fun? Well, what's the fun of a funeral if you come from the right part of the world? Unless you can't either whip somebody or be whooped. But what is all of that? Actually, beyond those kinds of explanations. And I was suggesting to you it is the imposition, again, of order. Because order is also synonymous in the human mind with sequence. That things seem to go, a continuity. And so they look at death, even though you know that your mother or your father is dead, it's not going to come back. In a sense, they're not dead as long as you remember them. And part of remembering them is, why do you go out to the grave? I know people can say, well, that's I like to be close. In a sense, it's to help you remember. But if you told people that, they'd almost be insulted, like, what do you mean, you think I don't remember my dead mother? It is a sense of continuity imposed upon that which is abrupt, disorderly, unstable, life itself. And I was even pointed out that the propping up, the continuation of houses of royalty in history and in legend was that same kind of sense. All right. Backing up always helps. Assuming you don't give a damn what happens to your rear tires, right? I picked that back up on the basis of I was going to point out that with Shakespeare's works is not only the dialogue and kinds of expressions that we could make a commentary and say, well, so-and-so character represents a certain kind of psychological, a certain kind of physical type person. A Falstaff represents this kind of attitude toward life. But also the stories themselves, in the same way Buddha could represent something as an individual if he really existed, or as I suggested you could also look at Buddha beyond the point of it being an individual and look at Buddha as being a word for the secret knowledge that was a process. So you could look at not just the dialogue between Hamlet and his mother, and not just beyond that, which was an attempted disruption of the continuity of the royal family there in Denmark. Something unexpected happened there in what should have been the chain of commands, not just at the characters, but you look at the story itself. And you could look at Hamlet as not being a play, look at Hamlet as not being a person, but what does it represent? It represents the attempt to continue order, although I know that if we had literary majors here, some critic, I started to say I'd lost them by now, but Jesus, if I hadn't lost them by now, they're in a coma anyway. They should go have a CAT scan if they're still here. That Hamlet itself, the story could be seen as the attempt, the struggle to reimpose order. They can call it all sorts of things. I'm sure that somebody has tried to extricate from it some sort of moral statement, some sort of tagline that shows the need for political stability, the need for living by some sorts of laws rather than human caprice. But I'm telling you that it goes further than all of that. That is just simply the outside trappings, because what it represents, I'm suggesting to you, the play itself. All of his works, but down to some of the specifics. The play itself, Hamlet, represents the mind still struggling to impose order on that which is disorderly. All right, we could use that. We could use writings of Dickens. We could use Mark Twain. You could pick out anything. Walt Whitman's writings, Emerson's writings, Balzac. You could pick out almost anything that is now considered to be worthy of recollection. And without any great effort, you can see, well, this could be literally beyond whatever might appear to be the enjoyable reading of fiction, of a play, of a drama, or of even an essay. But you can say beyond what appears to be the surface intention itself, you can see that as the attempt, there's some sort of message going through all of this. And I was simply calling it the mystical secret message. People always like that, and somebody already thought of the term before me. Beyond the specifics, another dash or semicolon, beyond those kinds of specific examples which are manifold. The real, well, the greater trick, the additional enjoyment at no additional charge, other than your own lazy fat brain cells, other than your own cow cells, your own sheep's cells, and those of you trying to weasel your way out, I hate to kill the animal allegories, and I'm not referring to those whose certain hormonal secretions may be waning, and you have sought out the injection of goat glands from that doctor in Mexico. I'm not referring to that. But for those of you, I think I'm getting at least a reaction back there just on the basis of suspicion that one person almost thinks he remembers hearing something about that many, many, many years ago in history. At any rate, without any great additional cost and with much greater pleasure, and many people, I can't resist another aside, many people find just that greatly pleasurable, that it would not be at all impossible to stir up interest, to start some sort of discussion group, or for a man to go out and give lectures or write books, which has already been done, but it's always open to, because something new is always coming, is to start writing. Well, you could write one right now. Let's say a new book. The reality of the secret knowledge of humanity as revealed allegorically in contemporary, and then fill it in. Film, probably a good one now, instead of just fiction. Now, there's been books for thousands of years, writings and people making commentaries, that as soon as some Greek wrote a play, as soon as some Chinese, as soon as some African shaman came up with this story about where we came from, what the story was, and just almost as soon as that had some marketability that was being passed around and remembered, then somebody came along. As soon as they probably had to have two stories to make it worthwhile for a guy to write it down or to try to make a living, that somebody would come along and say, you know the stories about our creation here and how we came out of a certain tree out there on the savannah, yeah, or whatever the stories were. And he said, and how about the other stories, the ones about blah, 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 and people, yeah. And he said, well, think about it. Now, the stories seem to be about different things, but think about it. If there was some sort of knowledge like driving the evolution of man, the development of us, you could look at it as being going right through there. People have already done that, that's what I'm saying. There's already been people, not long after the, let's say the heyday, the golden age of Greek drama, that very shortly thereafter, right at the tail end of it, was somebody writing saying, do you realize, fellow Athenians, that the great dramas that we go and see and that we enjoy, written by various dramatists, that there is somewhere lurking in that, whether they intend it or not, there's an allegorical message about the nature of man's life that runs through them all, whether they seem to be about war, love, men, women, children, whether they seem to be set here, whether they seem to be set across the sea, it's running through there. So there's always those kind of comments. And I'm saying that there's a continuing market because there's always something new to say, well, the metaphysical message is allegorically represented by modern professional sports, which is a bit regressive, but it's still, notice how popular it is that sports are still more popular than the arts and literature. But at any rate, people are attuned to it. Whether they think about it and whether they have a great interest, the books sell. Whether they make the bestsellers, there is a market for it. People will hear it. They will hear an anthropologist, or hear someone lecture in the literary department at some college. Somebody can always get up and say that they have discovered a whole new area of coded secret knowledge and messages in the works of, believe it or not, William Blake. A new level, never suspected. Or they could say in the works of James Thurber. Not just comedy, something else going on there. Listen to me. And they start doing it. Wait a minute. How did football suddenly, out of the whole, everything on this planet, we're talking about football as God intended it. North American, United States football, not that sissy, weird European stuff. I do that for a reason. I was trying to single out somebody say, why, out of all the soccer, the lacrosse, the rugby, all these other games, why? Think about it, friends. Why? The leading intellectual, cultural, financial, morally stable political country in the world, to wit, us, why was it left to us to develop? Think about it. The game of football, real football. There is, and then I could start. I'm just making up now. You could do it surely. Start making up about why they get in a huddle. Why the field is not just the 100 yards, but why the ratio of the width to the length of the field. The number of people on the team. You think it's 11, it's actually 12. Think about 12. A good mind attuned to that can see not just vague allegory in much of what man does. And if it got a little better, not just vague allegory in everything man does. No, a little better. But specific allegory in everything man does. And that's what I'm referring to, whether they could come up with a term. If you said to these people, there is some sort of knowledge that somewhere started on this planet, that let's assume I'm playing this part and I'm talking to ordinary humanity. There's some people who would sit and listen, educated, trying to be open-minded and interested people. And I just gave them a quick recounting of the Vedaic literatures, the Taoist writings, then the Buddhist literatures, the history of Greece and Rome, culturally speaking. I started giving them a real breakdown of the African, the South American myths, the tales of the past civilizations. And I said, listen, in all of that, it all represents that everybody's got some past heyday, some glorious day that is now in their past, that in some way they were superior, their culture, their race, their nationality, the humanity. Put them all together, whether it came from Brazil, whether it came from South America or Tibet. Put them all together, their stories, no matter what the context, no matter what the version was, what it says is that man at one time was privy to some either superior position, and they go, well, yeah, I know the stories, that they lived in paradise, Adam and Eve. And then they ran amok, and they got driven out and had to move to Ohio and Indiana and some of those other places. So, physically, and they go, yeah. And I say, but now consider, it might not just be that. Consider this, the superior position. It would not take a great stretch of imagination. You don't have to be unduly credulous and inane to, if I said, they were not just in a superior physical position, that is, living in paradise and they didn't have to work. They were in some way in a superior mental position. They might want to say spiritual, as you know, but mental. As witnessed by the story, people do not, at any rate, they could commune with God. God, reality, that they actually were in communion with Him. So you could say they were privy. People just, the religious, well, at any rate, that's not their job. They do not actually look at it in that manner. It was just a superior position. And they think that they were in a superior position, they might say, because God was looking after them better. which the Buddhist drama was supposed to, in a sense, take care of that dream that the help's from without. If there is any help, it's from within. If there is anything to be learned, it's from within and not without. But what I was saying is the ordinary religious, they might say, well, we do see that man was in not just a physically superior and more beneficial position, but spiritual. But they do not, because they see it on the basis, well, the master took better care of us back when we were slaves. That's all they're saying. That back when we lived on the plantation known as Eden, the master was better to us. And then we kind of made him mad or something. He said, get out of here. And so now we're kind of little lost slaves who have gone astray. Bah, bah. They don't have slaves at Harvard and friends. Well, at any rate. But they do not see it even though they might say, well, yeah, we agree it's in a superior position, but they don't see it in the superior position mentally as I'm describing it to you now. That is that they were in some way in direct contact. They just overlooked that part of the story. I mean, they know it's there, and they say, well, yeah, God talked to them. And you say, well, don't you see that represents that there was something specific? There was a direct contact between man at one time and some piece of something. Call it God if you want to. And we lost it, according to the myths. You didn't lose your place. So you could get people either interested in, they believe mysticism, or those who would just be interested in ideas and would give it a listen. You could get them to see that all of these stories, all of the myths, anything that you want to mention that is part of human civilization, storytelling, literature, drama, art, sports, that somewhere in that it all traces back according to everyone's culture, not my opinion, not something I made up. Take any stories you want to if you're well read enough. Just go talk or just think back to them. And all the stories, can you not hear the possibility that the stories, the games, all of the civilized activities, the things that man has thought up that are not necessary for survival, just hobbies, pastimes, interest, things that men do that are singular to man. Those things, can you see that within them you could trace or you could imagine? How about that? You could imagine that they all stem from this, and they're based on this unbroken line of some kind of knowledge. Of course, as I'll admit in a minute, I'm using knowledge as carelessly as the ordinary use God. But you got to call it something for a minute. It's not good to upset crowds before you're ready to end and leave, because they can turn into mobs. And nobody likes to be on stage and be stormed by a bunch of irate cows and sheep, especially waving their human skin, showing that they graduated and have education and credentials. You could get ordinary minds to see or to imagine that could be true. But here's what they can't imagine that I was saying is the additional fun at really no additional charge. Because if you go far enough, you've gone too far anyway and you can't ever really back up, so you might as well go ahead with it as best you can. You could see all, not the examples, not that it's not true, not Shakespeare, not just drama, not just Greek drama, not just Chinese drama, not just kabuki theater, not just the okay, all right, chorale theater. Not just art, not just painting, not just fiction, not just philosophy. Not that it's not true, but not just them, but all of life. Everything. That tends to make some sheep and cows' minds kind of, well, they feel like the end is near because their mind begins to gloss over and some of their brain cells look at one another and say, well, at least we will come to a good finish. It takes almost the hobby. It takes the expensive, fanatical hobby out of it. Not only did I manage to kill 90 seconds with that, Now some of you think you didn't hear it. Job well done. Thank you. You could see all of life, all of human life, not the bio-survival level, not the required level, but you could see every frigging part that is singular to man. Those of you that now have your own grasp of what I mean when I say civilization. Civilization. Not the subsets. It's certainly true. But without worrying about, religion. I wonder if religion is actually just some sort of outgrowth, some sort of kind of unruly, uncontrolled weed that sprang up around the original core of whatever this knowledge was. Remembering that by knowledge, I'm just being casual with the truth. But come to think about it, what is fiction? Why do people make up dreams? Why do they make up these stories about, one day Fred Bloom got up and looked around and he said, "God damn, I'm sick of Dublin." What does that represent, though? What does all fiction? Why do people make up stories? Why don't they just go out and live their life? Why do they sit there for years and make up stories about people outside their door living? Weird. But wait a minute. Then other people buy them. They get up and they go out and go down to the store and they buy this book, and then they go home and they sit down and close the door and turn their light and read about other people living. Why do people read biographies? Why do they read gossip? Why do you care what somebody else is doing? Wait a minute. All of that is some sort of reflection of what you're saying. That's an allegory for something. Beyond that, beyond the individual, can you see that all of civilization, everything that is singular to man, is the representation of the secret knowledge? Can you see that civilization itself is mysticism? I slipped it in on you by the definition that civilization, and I said, is the simple's attempt at mysticism, which is always we're picking on humans just because it's easier to talk about. It's not the simple's attempt at mysticism. It's the simple's acting out all that life wants them to do in the form of mysticism. All of civilization is a reflection of this secret knowledge. And I should be truthful. I was saying I was being as careless with words and calling it secret knowledge. Knowledge in the same way that humans call whatever they think it is, ordinary people, God. This unbroken thing that is the core, it is the trunk, it is the lifeblood of civilization. I can call it secret knowledge. There's actually a better word. Genes.